When my daughter Victoria looked me straight in the eye over Thanksgiving dinner at Willowbrook Manor and said, "You're dead to me, Mother," I just smiled and calmly reached for the cranberry sauce. What she didn't know was that I'd been waiting for that moment for 4 months. What she also didn't know was that her outburst would lead to her arrest, a federal investigation, and the discovery that my devoted daughter had been systematically draining my retirement funds while forging documents to have me declared incompetent. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The main dining hall at Willowbrook Manor buzzed with the artificial cheer that accompanies institutional holidays. Orange and brown streamers hung from the ceiling like tired autumn leaves, and someone had arranged miniature pumpkins on each table with the kind of determined optimism that makes you feel older just looking at it. The smell of mass-produced turkey filled the air, competing with the ever-present scent of industrial disinfectant that no amount of seasonal decoration could mask. My name is Margaret Sinclair, and at 72, I never imagined I'd be spending Thanksgiving in a place where someone else decides when I eat, when I sleep, and when I'm allowed to have visitors. 6 months ago, I was living independently in the Victorian house on Maple Street that my late husband Theodore and I had called home for 37 years. Today, I'm resident 314B in a facility that costs more per month than most people's mortgages, courtesy of my daughter's sudden concern for my safety and well-being. Victoria sat across from me at our assigned table, her manicured fingers drumming against the pressed white tablecloth. She'd driven up from her house in Riverside Hills, the exclusive gated community she'd moved to shortly after convincing me to sign over financial power of attorney. Her designer handbag sat primly beside her chair, the kind that costs more than some people make in a month. Everything about her screamed success, from her perfectly highlighted hair to her silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly medication budget. Beside her sat my grandson Timothy, 16 and uncomfortable in the button-down shirt Victoria had undoubtedly forced him to wear. He kept glancing between his phone and the institutional beige walls with the expression of someone serving a prison sentence. My heart ached looking at him. He used to spend weekends at my house, helping me in the garden and listening to stories about his grandfather. Now our visits were supervised, scheduled, and limited to this sterile environment. "The food's not bad here, Grandma Maggie," Timothy offered, cutting his turkey with the diplomatic skills of someone who'd learned to navigate his mother's moods early. "Better than the cafeteria at school, anyway." I smiled at him, the only genuine warmth I'd felt all day. "That's setting the bar pretty low, sweetheart." Victoria's fork clinked against her plate with unnecessary force. "Mother, please don't encourage him to complain. We're guests here, and the staff works very hard to provide—" "We're not guests, Victoria," I interrupted gently. "Guests can leave when they want to." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Victoria's jaw tightened, that subtle tell she'd inherited from her father along with his stubbornness and his green eyes. The difference was that Theodore had used his stubbornness to build our insurance business from nothing into something substantial. Victoria seemed to use hers primarily to get her way. "You know why you're here, Mother. The doctor said—" "Dr. Pemberton said I was in excellent health for my age. What he didn't say was that I needed to be locked away like a fire hazard. You fell down the stairs. You could have been seriously injured or worse. What if Timothy hadn't found you?" I looked at my grandson, who was now staring intently at his mashed potatoes as if they contained the secrets of the universe. The fall was minor, barely a stumble really. But Victoria had treated it like I'd taken a header off a cliff. Within a week, she'd arranged for my temporary move to Willowbrook just until we can figure out the best long-term solution. That was 6 months ago. I was still waiting to hear about this long-term solution, though I suspected I already knew what it was. The fall was an accident, Victoria. I caught my heel on the carpet runner. It happens to people half my age. But it doesn't happen to people half your age while you're alone in a 3-story house with no one to help you. You're being stubborn and unrealistic about your limitations. Timothy looked up from his potatoes. Mom, maybe we could— Timothy, eat your dinner, Victoria said without taking her eyes at me. I watched him shrink back into himself and felt something cold settle in my chest. This was how Victoria had always handled dissent in her family. Shut it down, control the narrative, make sure everyone knew who was in charge. I'd seen her do it to her ex-husband, and now she was doing it to her son, to me. Actually, I said, reaching for my water glass, I think Timothy's opinion matters quite a bit. After all, he's the one who visits me here every week, aren't you, sweetheart? Timothy nodded, glancing nervously at his mother.
That's enough, Victoria cut him off. Mother, you can't use Timothy to manipulate the situation. This isn't about what anyone wants. It's about what's safe and practical. I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment to stay calm. For 4 months, I'd been documenting every conversation, every decision made for my own good, every time Victoria had overruled my wishes about my own life. I'd been keeping careful records in a notebook I hid in my room, tracking the discrepancies between what Victoria told me about my finances and what I could piece together from the fragments of information she still allowed me to see. The problem was that when you sign power of attorney over to someone, especially when you're living in a facility where that someone is listed as your primary contact and decision maker, it becomes remarkably difficult to get straight answers about your own money. Victoria, I said carefully, when you picked up my mail last week, were there any statements from the bank? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Mother, I told you I'm handling all of that. You don't need to worry about the mundane details anymore. I'm not worried. I'm curious. It's still my money after all. Is it? The words slipped out before she could stop them, and I saw the exact moment she realized what she'd revealed. Her face flushed, and she quickly took a large bite of stuffing to cover her mistake. What did you just say? Victoria chewed slowly, clearly buying time to formulate an answer. When she finally swallowed, her expression had shifted to that patient, condescending look she used when she thought she was dealing with someone who couldn't possibly understand the complexities of adult life. Mother, you know I didn't mean it like that. Of course it's your money. I'm simply managing it responsibly on your behalf. The investments, the property taxes, the insurance premiums, it's all very complicated. And with your memory issues, my memory is fine, Victoria, crystal clear, in fact. Is it? Because last month you asked me 3 times when Timothy's birthday was. No, I asked you 3 times whether you'd remembered to get him a gift, because you have a history of forgetting important dates until the last minute. Timothy snorted, then quickly covered it with a cough. Victoria shot him a warning look that could have melted steel. You see, she said, turning back to me, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're becoming paranoid, combative, you're questioning everyone's motives, even mine. Especially yours, I said quietly. The words hung between us like a gauntlet thrown down in a medieval courtyard. Around us, other families continued their holiday conversations, unaware that our little corner of the dining room had become a battlefield. Victoria set down her fork with deliberate precision. I beg your pardon? You heard me. I'm questioning your motives, Victoria, because your behavior over the past 6 months has been questionable at best. How dare you? How dare I what? Ask about my own bank statements? Wonder why I'm living in a facility that costs $4,800 a month when my pension is only $3,200? Question why you suddenly become so interested in managing my affairs when you barely called me twice a month before your father died? Timothy's eyes had gone wide. He'd stopped pretending to eat and was staring at us like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. Victoria's face had gone pale except for 2 bright spots of color high on her cheekbones. "Mother, you're making a scene. People are staring." "Let them stare. Maybe they'll learn something about how to recognize financial elder abuse when they see it." The words hung in the air like an accusation carved in stone. Victoria's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. "Financial abuse? Mother, have you lost your mind completely? I'm the one who's been taking care of you. I'm the one who found this place, who arranged for your care, who drives up here every week to make sure you're all right. You're the one who's been writing checks from my account to pay for a lifestyle I can't afford. You're the one who sold my house without my knowledge and moved me into this place before I could object. You're the one who's been making decisions about my life, my money, and my future without bothering to consult the person those decisions affect most." Victoria stood up abruptly, that her chair nearly tipped over. The dining room had gone noticeably quieter, and I could feel the weight of curious eyes on our table. "I have been taking care of you," she hissed, leaning forward with her hands braced on the table. "I have been protecting you from yourself, from scam artists, from your own poor judgment. Do you know what would have happened if I hadn't stepped in? You'd be broke within a year, living some state-run hellhole with no one to advocate for you. Instead, I'm broke now, living in a private hell."
She grabbed her purse from the floor and slung it over her shoulder like a weapon. "You want to handle your own affairs? You want to question every decision I make for your benefit? Fine, figure it out yourself. See how far your paranoia and ingratitude get you when you're completely alone." She turned to Timothy, who was staring at her in shock. "Timothy, we're leaving, now." But it was then, as she was gathering her things with the righteous indignation of someone who believes their own lies, that she made her fatal mistake. She looked me directly in the eye, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent dining room, and said the words I'd been waiting months to hear. "You're dead to me." That's when I smiled, not out of cruelty or satisfaction, but out of pure relief, because Victoria had just severed the one thing that had been protecting her from the consequences of her actions. As long as I was her loving, confused, grateful mother, she could continue to gaslight me about my memory, my judgment, and my right to control my own life. But the moment she declared me dead to her, she freed me to stop being her victim. I reached for the cranberry sauce with steady hands, spooned a generous portion onto my plate, and said, "That's interesting, dear, because according to my calculations, you've been treating me like I was dead for quite some time. The only difference is dead people don't usually have $43,000 transferred out of their accounts in 4 months. The color drained from Victoria's face like water from a broken glass. Timothy's mouth fell open, and in that moment of perfect, crystalline silence, I realized that Thanksgiving dinner was about to become the least of Victoria's problems. Around us, the dining room had gone completely still. Even the staff had stopped their bustling to watch our family drama unfold. I could hear the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of someone's walker squeaking across the floor in another part of the building. Victoria stood frozen, her purse half raised to her shoulder, staring at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. What did you just say?" I took a delicate bite of cranberry sauce, savoring both the tartness and the moment. "I said $43,000, Victoria. That's how much has disappeared from my accounts since you convinced me to sign that power of attorney. Would you like me to break it down by month, or would you prefer to hear about the forged documents first?" Timothy was looking back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis match played with grenades. "Mom? Grandma? What's going on?" Victoria ignored him completely. Her eyes were fixed on me with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. "Mother, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I haven't discovered anything, dear. I've documented it. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every bill you've paid yourself for services rendered. I may be old, Victoria, but I'm not senile, and I'm certainly not blind. The lie came easily because it was wrapped around a core of truth. I had been documenting what I could, but my access to information was severely limited. But Victoria's reaction told me everything I needed to know about how much I'd actually uncovered versus how much there was to find. Her face had gone from pale to ashen, and her hand was gripping her purse strap so tightly her knuckles were white. You can't possibly, you don't have access to my own financial records? You're right, I don't. You've made sure that. But I do have access to my memory, and I've been keeping very careful track of the stories you've told me versus the reality I've been able to piece together. I leaned back in my chair, feeling more in control than I had in months. For instance, you told me the reason I can't access my online banking is because the password was compromised. But when I called the bank directly, yes, dear, I still remember how to use a telephone, they told me that the account holder had specifically requested that access be restricted. Victoria's breathing had become shallow and rapid. I was protecting you from what? From knowing that my house sold for $230,000 more than you told me? From seeing that you've been paying yourself a monthly caregiver fee of $1,500? From discovering that you've transferred my investment portfolio to an account I can't access? Each revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. She actually swayed on her feet, and for a moment I thought she might faint. Timothy reached out to steady her, his young face creased with worry and confusion. "Mom, are you okay? What is Grandma talking about?" Victoria jerked away from his touch. She's confused, Timothy. She doesn't understand how these things work." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent dining room. "I understand that you've been systematically stealing from me while convincing everyone, including yourself, that you're some kind of saint for taking care of your poor, helpless mother." That's when Victoria snapped. Her face contorted with a rage so pure and primal that Timothy actually took a step back from her. "Stealing? Stealing? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for you? Do you know what it's cost me to manage your life, to deal with your stubbornness, to clean up the mess you've made of everything? You think this place pays for itself? You think your care is free? Someone has to make the hard decisions, and someone has to pay for them."
"Someone has to pay for them," I repeated slowly, "and that someone is me, with my own money, that you've been taking without my knowledge or consent. It's not stealing when it's for your own good." The words echoed across the dining room like a confession shouted in a cathedral. I saw several staff members exchange glances, and I knew this conversation was being witnessed by people who were trained to recognize exactly the kind of abuse Victoria had just admitted to. "Ah," I said softly, "there it is, the truth at last." Victoria seemed to realize what she'd said because her face went through a series of expressions like a broken slideshow: anger, fear, realization, panic, and finally, a cold calculation that made my blood run cold. "You can't prove any of this," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than her shouting. "You're a confused old woman with no access to records, no credibility, and no one who's going to believe your paranoid fantasies over the word of your devoted daughter who's been sacrificing everything to care for you." She leaned closer, her voice becoming even quieter, more intimate, as if she were sharing a secret. "And even if you could prove it, what do you think would happen? You think some judge is going to reverse a conservatorship based on the ramblings of someone who's already been declared incompetent to manage your own affairs? You think anyone's going to listen to you when I testify about your memory problems, your falls, your inability to live safely on your own? The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't anger anymore. This was calculation. This was someone explaining why their victim should give up and accept defeat. You have no power here, Mother. You have no rights that I don't grant you. You have no money that I don't control. You have no future that I don't decide for you. So you can sit here in this place that I pay for, eating food that I arrange for you to receive, and you can be grateful that I'm generous enough to visit you at all. She straightened up, smoothing her blouse with hands that were barely trembling. Timothy, we're leaving. Now. But Timothy didn't move. He was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before, his 16-year-old face struggling to process what he'd just witnessed. "Mom," he said slowly, "did you really take Grandma's money?" Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something desperate underneath. "Timothy, you don't understand. Grandma's confused. She doesn't remember things correctly, and—" "I heard what you said. You said it wasn't stealing because it was for her own good. But she didn't want to live here, did she? She wanted to stay in her house." "Timothy! And you sold her house anyway, and you took her money anyway, and you put her here anyway." His voice was rising, drawing even more attention from the staff and other residents. "How was that not stealing?" Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. Her voice became shrill, desperate. "It's because I'm trying to protect her, because she's too old and too stubborn to make good decisions, because someone has to be the adult here." "But you're not protecting her," Timothy said, with the devastating clarity that only teenagers can muster. "You're controlling her. There's a difference." And that's when Victoria made the mistake that would change everything. In her fury and desperation, she grabbed Timothy's arm hard enough to leave marks and hissed, "You don't know what you're talking about. You're just a child, and you'll do what I tell you to do, just like she will." The dining room erupted, not in sound, but in movement. 3 staff members converged on our table simultaneously. A woman in scrubs was already speaking into a radio. An elderly man at the next table was holding up his phone, clearly recording. And Timothy, sweet Timothy, pulled his arm away from his mother and said, in a voice that carried across the entire room, "Don't touch me like that. And don't talk about Grandma like that either." Victoria looked around wildly, seeming to realize for the first time that our private family drama had become a very public spectacle. Her eyes met mine across the table, and in that moment, I saw her understand exactly what had just happened. She had revealed herself completely, not just to me, but to witnesses, staff members who were mandated reporters, other families who could corroborate what they'd heard, and her own son who would never look at her the same way again. "This isn't over," she whispered. I smiled again, wider this time. "You're absolutely right, Victoria. It's not over. It's just beginning." She turned and fled, leaving Timothy standing by the table, looking lost and shaken. I reached out and took his hand. "Come sit with me, sweetheart. We have some things to talk about." As Timothy settled into his mother's abandoned chair, I caught the eye of the staff member who was still speaking into her radio. She nodded at me, and I knew that within minutes—
The silence in my room at Willowbrook Manor was different that night. Not the usual institutional quiet of regulated bedtimes and muffled conversations through thin walls, but the heavy silence that comes after you've crossed a line you can never uncross. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, still wearing the burgundy dress I'd chosen for Thanksgiving dinner, and stared at the small wooden jewelry box on my nightstand. Inside that box, hidden beneath my mother's pearl earrings and the silver bracelet Theodore had given me for our 25th anniversary, was a key. Not the kind that opens doors or starts cars, but the kind that opens safety deposit boxes, the kind Victoria didn't know I still had. Timothy had stayed for 2 hours after his mother stormed out of the dining room. Sweet boy, he'd helped me back to my room and sat in the uncomfortable visitor's chair while I made us both tea with my contraband electric kettle. The staff pretended not to notice the kettle. Small rebellions were tolerated here, as long as you didn't burn the place down. "Grandma Maggie," he'd said, stirring honey into his cup with the plastic spoon I'd saved from the cafeteria, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." I'd looked at his earnest 16-year-old face, so much like his grandfather's at that age, and felt my heart break a little. "Always, sweetheart? Is my mom really stealing from you?" The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I should help him cross. Once I answered, there would be no protecting him from the truth about his mother, no pretending that families always love each other in ways that leave scars. "Yes," I'd said simply, "she is." He'd nodded slowly, processing this confirmation of something he'd probably sensed for months. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to stop her." "How?" That's when I'd told him about the safety deposit box, about the documents I'd hidden there 6 months ago, when Victoria's sudden interest in my finances had first started to feel like something other than daughterly concern. About the backup plan I'd put in place, because 47 years of marriage to an insurance man had taught me that you always prepare for the worst-case scenario. Now, 3 hours after Timothy had kissed my forehead and promised to call me tomorrow, I was holding that key and trying to decide whether I was brave enough to use it. The problem with safety deposit boxes is that you can't access them from an assisted living facility at 10:30 on a Thursday night. You need business hours, identification, and most importantly, transportation. All things that were complicated when your daughter had convinced the world that you were too fragile and confused to navigate them alone. But I'd been thinking about this problem for months, and I'd come up with a solution. I picked up my room phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never called. "Riverside Taxi Service," a gravelly voice answered on the third ring. "Hello, this is Margaret Sinclair at Willowbrook Manor. I need a ride to First National Bank tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. "You'll need to arrange that through your facility's transportation coordinator, ma'am. We don't pick up from assisted living without proper authorization." I had expected this. "What if I met you at the corner of Elmwood and 3rd Street? That's public property." A pause. "Well, I suppose if you were already there when we arrived, that would be different. But ma'am, I have to ask, does your family know you're planning this trip?" "My family," I said carefully, "is the reason I need to make this trip." Another pause, longer this time. 9 a.m. at Elmwood and 3rd, $40 minimum, cash only. "Thank you." I hung up and immediately dialed another number, this one written in fading ink on a business card I'd kept in my wallet for 3 years. "Blackwood and Associates, this is the answering service. I need to speak with James Blackwood. This is Margaret Sinclair, and it's urgent. Mr. Blackwood isn't available until... Tell him it's about elder financial abuse and I have documentation. Tell him I'll pay his full retainer in cash tomorrow if he can see me at 10 a.m. Hold, please." The hold music was a tinny version of yesterday that made me feel ancient. I was about to hang up when a crisp male voice came on the line. "Mrs. Sinclair, this is James Blackwood. What exactly are we talking about here?" I met James 3 years ago when he had handled Theodore's will. He was in his 40s then, sharp-eyed and unimpressed with tears or drama. The kind of lawyer who treated legal problems like mechanical issues. Identify the broken part, fix it, send the bill. "Power of attorney abuse," I said. "Approximately $50,000 stolen over 6 months, forged documents, possible conspiracy to have me declared incompetent." $50,000? His voice had sharpened. "Mrs. Sinclair, are you in a safe location? Do you have access to your documentation?" "I'm at Willowbrook Manor, against my will, and yes, I have documentation, but not here. I need to retrieve it." "Don't do anything until I see you. My office, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Can you get there safely?" "I'll manage." "Mrs. Sinclair, be very careful who you trust. If what you're telling me is accurate, whoever is doing this has a lot to lose." After I hung up, I sat in my chair and looked around my small room. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep. Instead, I lay awake thinking about the documents in that safety deposit box. The real estate papers, showing what my house had actually sold for. The investment statements Victoria thought had been destroyed. The copies of bank records I'd requested and hidden before she'd gained control of my mail. The handwritten log I'd kept of every suspicious transaction, every lie she'd told me, every time she'd overruled my decisions for my own good. Most importantly, the letter I'd written to myself 6 months ago, the one that began, "If you are reading this, it means Victoria has succeeded in having you declared incompetent, or you are dead. Either way, you need proof that you saw this coming." I must have dozed because I woke to my alarm and the sound of rain against my window. Good. Rain would give me cover for wearing a coat with deep pockets and would make the staff less likely to notice one more elderly person hunched against the weather. At 7 a.m., I was dressed in my most conservative outfit. Navy slacks, white blouse, pearls, the uniform of respectable old ladies everywhere. I braided my silver hair into a neat bun and applied lipstick with the same care I'd used 40 years ago when I was still trying to impress clients at the insurance office. At 7:30, I went to breakfast in the main dining room. Same institutional eggs, same weak coffee, same cheerful morning chatter from residents who'd made peace with their circumstances. I smiled and nodded and ate my toast while mentally rehearsing my escape route. The trick to leaving an assisted living facility without permission isn't stealth, it's misdirection. You don't sneak out like a teenager. You walk out like you belong, like you have every right to be wherever you're going. At 8:15, I signed out at the front desk. "Just getting some fresh air in the courtyard," I told Denise, the morning receptionist. "Doctor's orders." The courtyard was accessible from the main building, but also had a gate that opened onto Elmwood Street. The gate was kept locked, but the lock was the kind of simple mechanism designed to keep confused residents from wandering, not to imprison determined ones. I'd tested it 3 times over the past month during my fresh air excursions. At 8:50, I was standing on the corner of Elmwood and 3rd Street in the rain, looking like exactly what I was, a well-dressed elderly woman waiting for transportation. When the yellow taxi pulled up, I climbed in with the same dignity I'd use boarding a limousine. "First National Bank," I told the driver, handing him 2 20s, "and I'll need you to wait for me." "How long?" 30 minutes, maximum." First National Bank had been my bank for 37 years. I'd deposited my paychecks there, taken out loans there, celebrated when we'd finally paid off the house mortgage. The staff had known me by name until Victoria had convinced them I was no longer managing my own affairs. But safety deposit boxes have different rules. As long as you have the key and valid identification, and as long as your name is on the signature card, they have to let you in. Even if your daughter has power of attorney, even if you're technically not supposed to be there. Mrs. Sinclair, the young man at the customer service desk looked genuinely pleased to see me. How are you? We haven't seen you in months. I'm well, thank you, David. I need to access my safety deposit box, please. His smile faltered slightly. Oh, well, I'll need to... Let me just check with my supervisor about the procedure, since your daughter has been handling... David, I said gently, my daughter has power of attorney over my checking and savings accounts. She does not have access to my safety deposit box. That requires a separate authorization, which she does not have. He looked uncertain. Let me just verify that with... Of course. Take all the time you need to confirm that I have every legal right to access my own safety deposit box. 5 minutes later, I was in the vault, alone with box 1247 and 37 years of careful record-keeping. I've been adding to this box for 6 months, every time I could slip away from Willowbrook for a doctor's appointment or shopping trip. Every document that proved Victoria's version of my financial situation was a carefully constructed lie. I opened my large purse and began transferring papers. Bank statements showing the real balance of accounts Victoria claimed were nearly depleted. Investment records showing healthy portfolios she'd told me had lost most of their value. The real estate settlement statement showing my house had sold for $230,000 more than Victoria had claimed. Most damning of all, the signed agreement Victoria had made with Willowbrook Manor promising to pay my monthly fees from my estate, while simultaneously telling me that my savings were barely enough to cover basic expenses. At the bottom of the box was a manila envelope I'd hoped I'd never...
Blackwood and Associates, I told the driver, downtown legal district. James Blackwood's office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian mansion, all exposed brick and polished hardwood floors, the kind of place that charged high fees but delivered results. He met me in the reception area personally, a tall man with prematurely gray hair and the kind of handshake that suggested he didn't waste time on pleasantries. Mrs. Sinclair, thank you for coming. Shall we? His office was lined with law books and filing cabinets, the tools of someone who built cases methodically and won them decisively. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Before we begin, I need to ask, are you here of your own free will? Are you under any duress or coercion? I'm here because my daughter has been stealing from me for 6 months, and I want it stopped. He nodded. Good. Clear and simple. Now, show me what you have. For the next hour, I spread documents across his desk like a prosecutor laying out evidence. Bank statements, investment records, real estate papers, photographs, my handwritten log of every suspicious transaction. James examined each piece methodically, making notes on a legal pad in handwriting so neat it looked typed. This is very thorough and very damaging. If these documents are authentic, and I'll need to verify that, we're looking at systematic financial exploitation of an elderly person. That's a felony in this state. What's our next step? Our next step is to get you somewhere safe while I build this case. Mrs. Sinclair, I need you to understand something. If Victoria realizes you've accessed these documents, if she discovers you're building a case against her, she's going to escalate. People who steal $50,000 don't just apologize and return the money when they're caught. They double down. What do you mean? I mean she might try to have you declared incompetent faster than we can stop her.
She might try to move you to a facility where you have less access to outside help. She might try to isolate you from potential witnesses like your grandson. The room felt suddenly cold. She wouldn't. Mrs. Sinclair, she's already done all of those things. The only question is how far she's willing to go to protect herself. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. I need to ask you a difficult question. Are you prepared for this to destroy your relationship with your daughter permanently? Because that's what we're talking about here. If we move forward, Victoria will likely face criminal charges. She could go to prison. Your family will never be the same. I thought about Timothy's young face across the dinner table, watching his mother reveal herself as someone he'd never seen before. I thought about the casual cruelty in Victoria's voice when she'd explained why I had no power, no rights, no future that she didn't control. Mr. Blackwood, my relationship with my daughter was destroyed the moment she decided I was worth more to her as a victim than as a mother. I'm just finally ready to admit it. He nodded slowly. Then let's make sure we do this right. I'm going to file for an emergency hearing to have the power of attorney revoked. I'm going to request a full audit of all accounts she's had access to. And I'm going to arrange for you to be moved to a different facility, one where she can't control your access to legal representation. How long will all of this take? If we move fast, 2 weeks to get you out of immediate danger, 2 months to build a complete case, 6 months to a year to see it through the courts. I looked at the stack of documents on his desk, the evidence of my daughter's betrayal spread out like autopsy photos. And if we don't move fast, then you might wake up tomorrow to find yourself declared incompetent by a doctor Victoria has paid to reach that conclusion. Or you might find yourself transferred to a memory care facility where your ability to communicate with the outside world is severely limited. Or you might simply disappear into a system where no one listens to confused old ladies who make wild accusations about their devoted daughters. The weight of what he was saying settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my freedom, my autonomy, my right to exist as myself, rather than as Victoria's convenient victim. What do you need from me? I need you to go back to Willowbrook and act like nothing has changed. Don't confront Victoria about what you know. Don't tell anyone except Timothy what we're doing. Don't give her any reason to suspect that you're building a case against her. And if she tries to move me or change my situation, you call me immediately, day or night. He handed me a business card with his cell phone number written on the back. Mrs. Sinclair, I want you to understand something. What your daughter has done to you is not just theft. It's a form of domestic violence. Financial abuse is domestic violence, and it's designed to strip away your power to resist or escape.
Mr. Blackwood, there's something else. Something I found in Victoria's papers that I haven't told you about yet. He turned from the window. What? A draft petition to have me declared legally incompetent, dated 2 weeks from now. She's not just stealing from me passively, she's building towards something bigger. His face went very still. Do you have a copy of this document? I pulled out my phone. The smartphone Timothy had insisted I learn to use, despite Victoria's protests that it was too complicated for me. On the screen was a photograph of a legal document bearing Victoria's signature and the letterhead of a law firm I'd never heard of. James looked at the photo and swore softly. Mrs. Sinclair, we're not moving fast anymore. We're moving now, today. I'm filing for an emergency protective order this afternoon. We're going to request immediate suspension of Victoria's power of attorney and immediate placement of your assets under court protection. What do I do in the meantime? You go back to Willowbrook. You act completely normal. You don't let Victoria know that anything has changed, and you wait for my call. The taxi ride back to the facility felt like a journey into enemy territory. Every familiar landmark looked different, now that I understood how precarious my situation really was. The shopping center where Victoria had taken me for therapeutic outings while secretly restricting my access to my own money. The medical building where she'd arranged for doctors who barely examined me to sign off on her version of my mental state. When I signed back in at Willowbrook, Denise looked up from her computer with a frown. "Mrs. Sinclair, your daughter called about an hour ago. She wants to speak with you as soon as you return." My blood turned to ice water. "Did she say what about?" "Something about an important family matter that needs to be discussed." I forced my voice to remain steady. "Did she leave a message?" "She said she'll be here at 4 o'clock for a family meeting with you and the facility's social worker." I looked at the clock on the reception desk. It was 12:30. In 3.5 hours, Victoria would be here, and she would have the facility's social worker in the room to witness whatever she was planning to do. I thanked Denise and walked to my room on legs that felt like they were made of paper. Once inside, I locked the door and sat on my bed, trying to think. Victoria's call couldn't be a coincidence. Something had triggered her suspicion. Someone had told her something, or she'd discovered something, or... My phone rang. Victoria's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering, trying to keep my voice normal. "Hello, dear." "Mother?" Her voice was crisp, professional, the tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news. She wanted to sound like good news. "I hope you had a pleasant morning. I understand you went out." "Just to the courtyard for some fresh air. Doctor's orders." "Of course. Well, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I believe I may have been too harsh. Family shouldn't fight, especially over misunderstandings about financial matters." Every word felt like a trap being set. "That's very thoughtful of you, Victoria. I've arranged for us to meet this afternoon with Mrs. Henderson, the facility's social worker. I think it would be beneficial for us to clear the air about any confusion you might have regarding your care and your finances." "What kind of confusion?" "Well, sometimes when people are under stress or when their memory isn't quite as sharp as it used to be, they can misinterpret normal financial management as something more sinister. I want to make sure you understand exactly how I've been helping you and why every decision I've made has been in your best interest." The casual gaslighting was breathtaking. She was already laying the groundwork to dismiss anything I might say as confusion or memory problems. "I see. And what exactly will this meeting accomplish?" "Peace of mind, Mother, for both of us. I'll bring all the relevant documents so you can see exactly where your money has gone and why every decision I've made has been protecting you, not taking advantage of you." "And if I still have concerns after seeing these documents?" A pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had cooled by several degrees. "Then we'll discuss what additional support you might need to help you process complex information. Sometimes when people are struggling with cognitive issues, they need more structured care environments to keep them safe from their own confusion." There it was, the threat delivered with surgical precision. Agree that she's been helping me, or be declared too confused to make my own decisions. "I understand," I said carefully. "What time should I expect you?" 4 o'clock. "And Mother, I'm bringing Dr. Pemberton with me. He wants to do a quick cognitive assessment, just to establish a baseline for your care going forward." My heart stopped. Dr. Pemberton was the physician Victoria had chosen to oversee my care at Willowbrook. A man I'd met twice, both times in Victoria's presence, both times for perfunctory examinations that lasted less than 10 minutes. The kind of doctor who was more interested in his fee than his patients. Why would I need a cognitive assessment? "Just routine, Mother. Nothing to worry about. Dr. Pemberton wants to make sure your current medications aren't affecting your judgment or memory. We all want what's best for you." After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Victoria wasn't just moving to have me declared incompetent. She was doing it today.
this afternoon in a meeting disguised as family therapy with a doctor who would rubber stamp whatever diagnosis she needed. I called James.
Mrs. Sinclair? What's happened? She knows. She's coming here at 4 o'clock with a doctor to have me declared incompetent today. Jesus. Okay, listen to me very carefully. Do not attend that meeting. Do not speak to Dr. Pemberton without independent legal representation present. Do not sign anything, agree to anything, or consent to any medical evaluation. How can I avoid it? I live here. She has power of attorney. Not anymore. I'm filing the emergency petition right now. By 3 o'clock, there will be a court order preventing Victoria from making any medical decisions for you or removing you from your current facility without court approval. Will that be enough? It'll buy us time. Mrs. Sinclair, I need you to pack a bag. Light clothing, essential medications, important documents. There's a chance you might need to leave Willowbrook today. Leave? And go where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere Victoria can't control who you see or what medical care you receive. I have a colleague who runs a private care facility that specializes in protecting vulnerable adults. They're discreet, they're secure, and they follow court orders instead of family pressure. I looked around my small room at the few personal possessions I'd been allowed to keep when Victoria moved me here. Mr. Blackwood, I'm scared. You should be. But Mrs. Sinclair, you're also fighting back, and that makes all the difference. As I began packing my few belongings into the small suitcase I'd kept in my closet, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, trusting, grieving, willing to let my daughter take care of the details while I focused on learning to live without Theodore. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to people who made the mistake of thinking that old meant helpless. At 3:15, my phone rang. James Blackwood's voice was triumphant. We got it! Emergency protective order signed and filed. Victoria's power of attorney is suspended pending investigation. She cannot make medical decisions for you, she cannot access your accounts, and she cannot remove you from Willowbrook without court approval. What happens now? Now, you go to that meeting at 4 o'clock and you watch your daughter learn that she's no longer in control of the situation. I looked at my packed suitcase, at the legal documents spread across my bed, and the phone number for the taxi service I'd programmed into my contacts. And after that? After that, Mrs. Sinclair, we take your daughter to court and make her pay for every dollar she stole and every day she stole from your life. At 3:45, I walked down the hall toward the conference room where Victoria was weighing. But this time, I wasn't walking as her victim. I was walking as her opponent. And I was ready to fight. The conference room at Willowbrook Manor felt smaller when it was full of people who didn't trust each other. Victoria sat across from me at the polished wooden table, her perfectly styled hair catching the fluorescent light, her hands folded in her lap like a woman confident in her control of the situation. Beside her sat Dr. Pemberton, a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the distracted air of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Mrs. Henderson, the facility social worker, occupied the head of the table with a manila folder thick with paperwork. What Victoria didn't know was that James Blackwood was sitting in the parking lot monitoring his phone for my text message. What she also didn't know was that the emergency protective order had been served to Willowbrook's administration 30 minutes ago, and that Dr. Pemberton's planned cognitive assessment was no longer legally possible without my explicit consent. But I wanted to hear what she had to say first. I wanted to let her dig her hole a little deeper before I buried her in it. "Mother," Victoria began, her voice carrying the patient tone of someone explaining simple concepts to a confused child. "I've asked Dr. Pemberton to join us today because I'm concerned about some of the things you said yesterday. Making accusations of theft, claiming not to remember conversations we've had about your care. These could be signs that we need to adjust your medication or consider additional support."
Mrs. Henderson nodded sympathetically. Mrs. Sinclair, your daughter is just trying to make sure you're getting the best possible care. Sometimes when people are adjusting to assisted living, they can experience confusion or paranoia that feels very real to them. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of accusations are we talking about, Victoria? Well, yesterday you claimed that I'd stolen money from you. You said something about $43,000, which, frankly, doesn't make sense given your actual financial situation. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I brought all your financial statements so you can see exactly where your money has gone. Every transaction has been necessary for your care or your living expenses. She spread the papers across the table with the confidence of someone presenting irrefutable evidence. Bank statements, investment summaries, receipts from Willowbrook Manor, medical bills. Everything looked official, properly formatted, completely legitimate. Everything was also completely fabricated. I recognized Victoria's handiwork because I'd spent 47 years married to a man who investigated insurance fraud for a living. Theodore had taught me to spot altered documents, forged signatures, and numbers that didn't add up. These statements were masterpieces of deception, showing accounts that barely existed and expenses that had never been incurred. "These are very thorough," I said, picking up one of the bank statements. "May I ask where you obtained these?"
I see. And this statement showing a balance of $1,200 in my checking account, when was this generated? Victoria glanced at Dr. Pemberton, who was making notes on a clipboard. Last week. As you can see, Mother, your finances are quite limited. The fees for this facility, your medications, your other care expenses, they've depleted most of your savings. I nodded thoughtfully. That's interesting, because I was at First National Bank this morning, and they showed me a very different set of numbers. The room went silent. Victoria's face didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten slightly on the edge of the table. Mother, that's not possible. You weren't at the bank this morning. You were here in the facility. Was I? I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening the photos I'd taken of the real bank statements, showing account balances that are quite different from what you've presented here. I slid the phone across the table to Mrs. Henderson. The checking account Victoria claims has $1,200 actually has $37,000. The investment account she says is depleted actually has over $200,000. Mrs. Henderson looked at the photos, then at Victoria's papers, then back at the photos. I don't understand. These numbers are completely different. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Mother, you're clearly confused. Those photos could be of anyone's accounts. You don't even know how to use that phone properly. You're right. I didn't know how to use it. Timothy taught me. Sweet boy. He's been teaching me lots of things lately. I pulled out the manila envelope I'd retrieved from my safety deposit box. For instance, he taught me how to take pictures of documents, like these. I spread Timothy's photographs across the table. Bank routing numbers for accounts I'd never authorized, spreadsheets tracking what Victoria had labeled MS Asset Transfer Progress, email printouts discussing accelerated timeline for incompetency petition. Dr. Pemberton had stopped taking notes and was staring at the evidence with obvious discomfort. Mrs. Henderson was frantically flipping between the fake statements Victoria had provided and the real documents I was showing her. Victoria, Mrs. Henderson said slowly, can you explain these discrepancies? She's having an episode, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its confident tone. This is exactly what I was talking about. She's becoming paranoid, obsessive. She's creating elaborate fantasies about theft and conspiracy. Fantasies? I reached into my purse again and pulled out a small digital recorder. Like this fantasy. I pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room clear and unmistakable. You have no power here, Mother. You have no rights that I don't grant you. You have no money that I don't control. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Pemberton had gone pale. Mrs. Henderson was staring at Victoria like she'd never seen her before. That's That's taken out of context. I was trying to help her understand her limitations for her own safety. Really, let me play you another section. This time it was Victoria's voice saying, "It's not stealing when it's for your own good." Mrs. Henderson stood up abruptly. "I need to call the administration immediately. Dr. Pemberton, I think this meeting needs to end." "Wait," Victoria said, panic creeping into her voice. "You're not listening to the full context. My mother is clearly experiencing cognitive decline. These recordings are her misinterpreting normal conversations about her care." That's when I decided to end the charade. "Victoria, there's something you don't know. At 11:30 this morning, an emergency protective order was filed with the county court. Your power of attorney over my affairs has been suspended pending a full investigation into financial elder abuse." The color drained from her face. "That's not possible. You don't have the capacity to hire my own lawyer, to access my own safety deposit box, to gather evidence of my own daughter's systematic theft." I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. "I'm 72 years old, Victoria, but I'm not dead, and I'm certainly not helpless." Dr. Pemberton was gathering his papers with obvious haste. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I'm not qualified to assess competency in a situation involving legal disputes." "Of course you're not, because you barely know me. In the 6 months I've been here, you've examined me exactly twice, both times in less than 10 minutes, both times in my daughter's presence. Any competency evaluation you provided would have been worthless anyway." Mrs. Henderson was on the phone with someone, speaking in urgent whispers. I caught fragments. "Financial abuse? Falsified documents? Needs security?" Victoria was staring at me like a stranger. "Mother, you don't understand what you're doing. If you fight me on this, if you try to manage your own affairs, you'll lose everything. You'll end up, son, in a state facility with no one to advocate for you." "I'd rather be poor and free than rich and imprisoned." "You can't live independently. You fell down the stairs. You need supervision." I caught my heel on a carpet.
Victoria followed my gaze and saw James approaching the building. "Who is that?" "That's my lawyer, James Blackwood. He's here to escort me to my new living arrangement, somewhere I can receive appropriate care without being systematically robbed by my own daughter." The door opened and James entered, along with Mrs. Henderson and a security guard I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Sinclair," James said formally, "are you ready to go?" "I've been ready for months." Victoria stood up so fast her chair toppled over. "You can't do this. I'm her daughter. I'm her family." "You were my daughter," I said quietly. "But family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't lie to each other. And family certainly doesn't try to have each other declared mentally incompetent to cover up their crimes." James was checking documents on his phone. "Mrs. Sinclair, I have confirmation that your new accommodations are ready. We've also received preliminary approval for asset recovery proceedings." "Asset recovery?" Victoria's voice was shrill now. "What does that mean?" "It means," James said, turning to face her, "that every dollar you've taken from your mother's accounts will be traced, documented, and recovered. It means you'll be facing criminal charges for elder financial abuse, and it means that if you attempt to contact Mrs. Sinclair or interfere with her care in any way, you'll be arrested for violating a court order." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward. "Victoria, I think you need to leave. Security will escort you out." "This is insane. She's a confused old woman who's been manipulated by some lawyer who wants to steal her money." I turned to face my daughter one last time. "Victoria, I raised you to be better than this. I taught you about integrity, about taking care of people who can't take care of themselves. What I never taught you was that elderly doesn't mean stupid, and vulnerable doesn't mean disposable." "Mother, please, I was trying to protect you." "No, you were trying to control me. There's a difference." As the security guard moved toward Victoria, she made her last desperate appeal. "Timothy? What about Timothy? You're destroying his family." "Timothy will be fine. In fact, he'll be better than fine, because he won't have to watch his mother abuse his grandmother anymore. He won't have to carry the burden of keeping secrets about what he's witnessed. He'll finally be free to have a relationship with me that isn't filtered through your greed and manipulation." Victoria was escorted from the room, her threats and protests echoing down the hallway until the doors closed behind her. Mrs. Henderson looked shaken. "Mrs. Sinclair, I owe you an apology. The facility should have recognized the signs of financial abuse. We failed you. You believed what you were told by someone who seemed credible and caring. Victoria is very good at appearing to be the devoted daughter. But now you know what to look for if this happens to another resident." James was gathering the evidence I'd spread across the table. "Mrs. Sinclair, we need to go. The transport is waiting, and I want to get you settled before Victoria has time to regroup and try something else." I looked around the conference room one last time. 6 months ago, I'd entered this building as Victoria's victim, stripped of my autonomy, and convinced I had no choice but to accept whatever care she provided. Today, I was leaving as my own advocate, with my dignity intact and my future back in my own hands. The ride to Harmony Gardens, my new residence, took 20 minutes through neighborhoods I remembered from when Theodore and I used to drive around looking at houses we couldn't afford. Theodore had chosen well. It was a smaller facility, more like an upscale apartment complex than an institution, with residents who moved freely and made their own decisions about their daily lives. "Mrs. Sinclair," James said as we pulled into the circular driveway, "I want you to understand what happens next. Victoria will likely try to challenge the protective order. She'll claim you're incompetent, that I'm exploiting you, that this whole thing is a misunderstanding. Are you prepared for that fight?" I looked at the building where I would be living, at the people walking freely in and out of the front doors, at the garden where residents were tending vegetables they'd chosen to plant. "Mr. Blackwood, 6 months ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was losing my independence. I thought being old meant being helpless, and being vulnerable meant accepting whatever help was offered, even if it came with strings attached. I was wrong. The worst thing that can happen is losing yourself, giving up your right to make your own choices, your own mistakes, your own decisions about how to spend the time you have left. And now? Now I know that independence isn't about being able to do everything yourself. It's about having the right to choose who helps you and how. It's about maintaining."
3 months later, Victoria was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for elder financial abuse and fraud. The $57,000 she'd stolen was returned to my accounts, along with penalties and interest. The forged documents she'd used to justify her actions were entered into evidence, ensuring that no other elderly person would fall victim to the same scheme. Timothy came to see me every weekend at Harmony Gardens. We planted tomatoes in the community garden, and played cards in the common room, and talked about his plans for college. He never asked about his mother, and I never volunteered information about the legal proceedings. Some wounds need time to heal before they can be examined. Dr. Pemberton lost his license to practice after an investigation revealed that he'd signed off on competency evaluations for dozens of elderly patients without conducting proper assessments. Mrs. Henderson left Willowbrook Manor and now works for the state's Adult Protective Services Department, where she investigates cases of elder abuse. And me? I'm still at Harmony Gardens, still making my own decisions about my care, my money, and my life. I have assistance when I need it, and independence when I don't. I have friends who treat me like an adult rather than a child, and caregivers who respect my autonomy even when they disagree with my choices. Victoria's name is never mentioned in my presence, per the terms of the restraining order that will remain in effect for the rest of my life. Sometimes I wonder if she understands what she lost when she decided I was worth more to her as a victim than as a mother. Sometimes I wonder if she ever truly saw me as a person rather than as an asset to be managed. But mostly, I don't think about Victoria at all. I think about Timothy's laughter when he beats me at poker. I think about the friends I've made who share stories about their own battles for dignity and independence. I think about the garden where I'm growing vegetables I chose to plant, in soil I chose to tend, under a sky that belongs to all of us equally. On Thanksgiving this year, Timothy and I will have dinner in the Harmony Gardens dining room, surrounded by people who chose to be there and staff who respect our choices. We'll talk about what we're grateful for, and I'll tell him that I'm grateful for the day his mother looked me in the eye and said I was dead to her. Because that was the day I decided to come back to life.